Ever feel like life is just one obstacle after another? You finally think you've got a handle on things, and bam, something else comes along to knock you off course.
Yeah, it can definitely feel that way sometimes.
But, what if there was sort of an ancient guidebook with strategies for navigating all of that?
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, today we're looking at Proverbs 24,
Okay.
a chapter that's, just packed with wisdom that's really relevant even thousands of years later. What do you think?
It is really fascinating how Proverbs goes beyond just like simple rules. It really dives into what makes us human, our nature.
Yeah.
And Proverbs 24 especially, it's almost like this blend of advice that never gets old, timeless advice, and then also this deep understanding of what happens when we make choices. Like, what are the consequences?
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to uncover today. We're going to unearth those like nuggets of wisdom and think about how they apply to our lives. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so like right off the bat, verses 3 and 4, they really hit us with this idea that knowledge and wisdom are important.
Yeah.
It's like building a house. I mean, if you don't have a strong foundation, the whole thing's going to crumble.
Such a good analogy. I mean, you wouldn't build a house on sand, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, you can't build a fulfilling life without, that foundation of wisdom and knowledge. And it's not even just about knowing a lot of facts.
Right.
It's about how you apply that knowledge and make good decisions, sound decisions.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we build that foundation of wisdom in our lives? Where do we even start?
Well, I think it starts with you. I mean, what matters to you? What are your precious riches and valuables, as Proverbs puts it? What are those things? When we figure that out, then you can start looking for knowledge, having experiences that fit with those values, those core values.
Okay, so that makes sense. But then verse 5 comes in, and it's like a curveball. It says, the wise are mightier than the strong. It seems kind of backwards in a world where everybody's always focused on being physically strong and powerful.
I know. It's a powerful statement, though. Like, what is strength, really?
Yeah.
Think about it. History is full of people who used their minds, their strategy, and they won even when the other side was way stronger.
Yeah, that's true.
Like David and Goliath.
Oh, yeah.
Or Gandhi. Or even, like, chess. I mean, the grandmaster beats the opponent because of his mind, right?
Wow, when you put it like that, it really makes sense. So it's not about saying physical strength isn't important.
Right.
It's more like the real power comes from understanding the world, how it works, how to deal with all the complicated things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that leads right into the next verse, which is all about getting advice from wise people before you make a big decision.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to have all the answers yourself.
Right.
Other people have experience, they have insights, and they can help you.
I've learned that lesson the hard way a few times. Let's just say I've made some interesting choices when I didn't ask for advice first.
Well, I think we've all been there, right? It's part of life.
Yeah.
But those bumps in the road, they teach us something, right?
True.
We learn to be humble. We learn we don't know everything.
Proverbs also doesn't shy away from, like, the hard stuff.
Yeah.
Like verses 7 through 9. They get real about what happens when you choose to be foolish instead of wise.
It's interesting. It's not just that fools are, like, ignorant, but the book also talks about bad character traits, like being a troublemaker, doing bad things, making fun of people.
It's like those negative behaviors are just symptoms of not being wise. If you don't have those wise principles to guide you, then, well, those tendencies can get out of control.
I like that. It's like wisdom isn't just what you know in your head. It's about who you are, your character, doing the right thing, making choices that lead to a good life, a fulfilling life.
And that leads us to something that really matters to me. Justice and compassion. Verses 11 and 12 really highlight that. It's almost like a call to action, like stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
It is powerful. It's like a reminder that we can't just ignore injustice. When people are suffering, we have to do something. And it's about taking responsibility. What we do, what we don't do, it matters. It has consequences.
But how do we put that into practice in our everyday lives? The world's a big place. It's easy to feel like what I do won't make a difference.
I get that. It can feel overwhelming, but I think the key is to focus on what you can do, where you can make a difference.
Okay.
Maybe it's your community, your job, even your family. Every little bit helps. Every act of kindness, every time you stand up against what's wrong, it all adds up to a better world, a more just world, a more compassionate world.
I like that. Welcome back to our deep dive into Proverbs 24. It's amazing how relevant this ancient wisdom still feels today.
I know, right? It just shows you the human experience really hasn't changed all that much.
Yeah, the struggles, the choices, the big questions we all ask. It's like we're all connected to the people who lived thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. And Proverbs 24 doesn't just talk about these big ideas. It gets into the nitty-gritty of how we treat each other, everyday stuff.
Totally. Like that verse about an honest answer being like a kiss of friendship.
Oh, yeah, I love that one. It's so simple, but it says so much about keeping it real in
It
relationships.
makes you think about how important honesty is for trust, for feeling connected to someone.
For sure. Have you ever noticed how dishonesty, even little white lies, can just poison a relationship?
Oh, absolutely. It eats away at that trust, and once the trust is gone, the whole relationship can crumble.
Exactly. And, it's not always easy, to be honest, especially when you have to have a tough conversation or admit you messed up.
Right.
But in the long run, honesty is the best way to build strong, lasting relationships.
So Proverbs 24 is all about honesty, but it also warns against the opposite, right? Like spreading gossip and lies about others.
Yep, verse 28 is super clear about that. Don't testify against your neighbor without cause. Don't lie about them.
It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity, especially with social media these days. You see all this drama unfolding online.
It's true, and that verse reminds us words have power. We have to be careful with what we say. It's our responsibility to be truthful and kind.
It's about building people up, not tearing them down, right?
Exactly. Okay, so we talked about honesty, avoiding gossip. What other practical wisdom do you see in Proverbs 24 for just like navigating everyday life?
Well, there's that verse about planting your fields before building your house. I feel like that's a metaphor for preparing for anything in life, you know?
It is, isn't it? It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Exactly. Whether it's a big decision or just a small task, taking the time to think it through, get ready, plan for challenges, it makes a huge difference in the end.
Totally agree. Like taking that time to think things through, gather what you need, anticipate any problems. That's how you get things done right.
I can be kind of impulsive, so this is a good reminder for me. I've definitely learned the hard way what happens when you don't plan ahead.
Well, I think we all have areas where we need that little push to be more prepared, right? And it's not about being rigid or inflexible. It's just about having a framework, a plan to approach things with intention and clarity.
So speaking of frameworks, Proverbs 24 also talks about respecting authority and upholding justice.
Yes.
What do you make of those verses about fearing the Lord and the king and avoiding those who rebel against authority?
Well, it's important to remember that the word king in Proverbs is talking about legitimate authority, leadership in general.
Right?
It's about recognizing that we need order and structure in society, and that means respecting those in leadership positions.
So it's not blind obedience or accepting injustice. It's about understanding that authority has a role in keeping society stable and fair.
Exactly. And it's also about holding those leaders accountable for their actions. There are verses that talk about showing favoritism or being corrupt when making judgments.
Yeah, those are pretty strong warnings against abuse of power. Injustice can really eat away at a community.
Absolutely. Proverbs reminds us that true leadership is about integrity, fairness, and serving others.
It makes you think about everything going on in the world today. There's so much abuse of power. People aren't held accountable.
I know. It's a challenge to stay informed, think critically, and hold those in power to a higher standard.
It's not just about those in high positions, though. That verse about it is wrong to show favoritism when passing judgment, that applies to all of us.
So true. Whether we're at work, with friends, or even interacting with strangers, we're called to be fair, to be impartial, and to treat everyone with dignity and respect.
It's the golden rule, right?
Exactly. Treat others the way you want to be treated.
It all comes back to that shared humanity, right?
Yes, and I think that's really at the heart of all the wisdom in Proverbs 24. It's about extending grace and understanding to others the same way we hope to receive it.
Beautiful said. So we've covered a lot of ground in Proverbs 24, from those big foundational principles to practical advice about relationships, honesty, and justice.
We have.
But there's one powerful image I want to come back to, the parable of the lazy person.
Oh yes, that picture of the neglected field full of weeds falling apart, it really stands out compared to the images of abundance and strength we saw earlier in the chapter.
It's almost like a warning, right? If we let laziness and procrastination take root, our lives can end up looking like that neglected field.
Absolutely, and it's not just about material things, it's about neglecting everything, our relationships, our health, our personal growth.
It's like we're letting our potential just slip away, giving up on the power to create a life filled with purpose.
You got it. It's about being proactive, choosing growth over stagnation, taking charge of your life instead of letting it fall apart.
So how do we avoid that? How do we cultivate diligence and actually overcome procrastination?
It starts with knowing yourself. What are your tendencies? When do you procrastinate? What motivates you? Once you understand those patterns, you can start figuring out strategies that work for you.
Okay, so it's like knowing your weaknesses so you can work on them.
Exactly. And some strategies might be setting realistic goals, breaking down big, overwhelming tasks into smaller ones, or just creating an environment where you can focus and get things done.
So it's not about becoming a robot or trying to be perfect. It's about finding what works for you, building systems to stay on track.
Yes. Progress over perfection, right? And don't forget to celebrate the little wins along the way. Every step towards being more diligent and intentional is a victory.
It's like that verse about the godly person stumbling 7 times but always getting back up.
Oh, yeah.
Resilience is the key part of all this, isn't it?
It's so important. We all stumble, we all have setbacks, but the key is getting back up, learning from those mistakes, and just keep moving forward.
It sounds like we're about to dig into some practical ways to do just that. Cultivate diligence and fight procrastination in part 3. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're finishing up our look at Proverbs 24. And I got to say, this chapter has really made me think about, well, how I approach life,
Yeah, it's really powerful stuff. We've talked about so much wisdom, justice, honesty, relationships, but that image, the neglected field from that parable about laziness, it's really stuck with me.
Yeah, me too. It's such a stark contrast to all the good imagery earlier on. Wisdom being like a sturdy house full of treasure, and then bam, we get this picture of decay, neglect, weeds taking over.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? When we let laziness and procrastination take over, it affects everything, not just stuff, but our relationships, our health, how we grow as people.
Like we're just letting our potential fade away, giving up the power to make a meaningful life.
That's it. That's it. It's about taking charge, choosing to grow, not just stay stuck. We have the power to cultivate our lives instead of letting them fall apart.
So how do we do that? How do we actually cultivate diligence, overcome procrastination? Where do we even begin?
Well, it starts with looking inward. What are your tendencies? When are you most likely to procrastinate? What really motivates you? Once you figure those things out, then you can start coming up with strategies that work for you, personalized strategies.
Okay, so it's like knowing your weaknesses so you can build up your defenses.
Exactly. And those strategies could be, I don't know, setting realistic goals, maybe, breaking down those huge tasks into smaller, more manageable steps, or even just creating a space where you can focus, get things done.
Right, so it's not about becoming some kind of productivity machine or trying to do everything perfectly. It's more about finding what works for you, building those systems to keep you on track.
Exactly. Progress, not perfection, right? And don't forget to celebrate those little wins along the way. Every step you take towards being more diligent, more intentional, that's a victory.
It makes me think about that verse, the one about the godly person stumbling 7 times but always getting back up.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Resilience is a big part of all of this, isn't it?
It's huge. We all stumble, we all have setbacks. But the important thing is to get back up, learn from it, and keep moving.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Proverbs 24, what's the one thing you really hope listeners take away from this?
For me, it's that wisdom isn't just about knowing a lot of things. It's about actually living it out. It's about making choices that reflect your values, treating people with kindness and respect, and building those habits, diligence and perseverance. Those habits help us reach our full potential.
I love that. It reminds me of what you said earlier about those honeycombs of wisdom in our world today. Where do you think people can find that guidance and inspiration?
I think it's everywhere if you're looking for it. It's in the books we read, the conversations we have, even the tough experiences that shape us. And sometimes it's in those quiet moments when you connect with that inner wisdom we all have.
So it's an ongoing journey, always seeking, learning, and growing.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so exciting, right? We're all on this path together, and each of us brings something unique to the table.
This has been such a fascinating look at Proverbs 24. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope you found some wisdom and inspiration here today. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep seeking, keep growing, and keep sharing those honeycombs of wisdom with the world.